Good morning. So this video is going to be a compare and contrast about what the average modern Westerner sees when they look at a chunk of raw food versus what I see. So the average Westerner, when they look at a chunk of raw meat or a bowl with raw egg in it that's fresh and freshly cracked, freshly opened, or a raw piece of octopus or shrimp or fish or caviar, they see potential death, potential illness, severe illness. At the least end of the spectrum, they see maybe a stomach ache and some diarrhea. At the worst end of the spectrum, they see a terribly painful death via microbes. When I look at raw foods, I see purity. Well, let me caveat that first. Take us back to year 25, just for fun. 25 AD. So you've got no synthetics in the sense of cosmetics, hygiene products, cleaning products. The most you have for synthetics are probably vinegars and maybe alcohols. I don't know for sure. But basically, you have nature and then you have humans and then you have humans interacting with nature, which are all the same thing, but people like to make a distinguishment. So no chemicals, no unnatural amounts and modulations of electromagnetic frequency. Just sun, soil, water, clean air, and then animals and plants. Animals as food, plants. So that's the ideal. There was probably some agriculture, so that's not ideal. But the agriculture of then was not as deplorable as the agriculture is now. So you have impurity. All the animals were, for the most part, eating their diets. The ruminants were eating forage, grass, browse, leaves. The pigs, the chickens, the turkeys, the fowl were eating bugs, rooting for tubers and grubs, eating acorns, mast, leaves, vegetation, but nowhere in any of the equations do you find large quantities of grains, distillery byproduct, being fed to animals, animals that are herbivores being fed themselves. You never would feed a cow to a cow, ground up cows to a cow. So that's the ideal. So when I'm talking about meats, eggs, fish, I don't want to have to every single time say grass-fed, wild-caught, humanely treated, from the least the least polluted biomes that you can think of. That should be a given. It's self-evident that a cow raised on grass with just a mineral lick and then pure spring water and sun is a completely different entity in terms of molecular composition than a cow being fed grain, distillery byproduct, beet, sugar beet pulp, loads and loads of grains, and then synthetics that we don't even, it would take all day to run down the list of words with 3, 4, and 5 syllables going into these animals' diets. In addition to chemically doped water, bad air, and just bad juju because of the way they're being treated. So when I see that grass fed or that wild caught hunk of meat or fish or octopus or squid or that cup of um, quail eggs or whatever, um, I see light radiating out of every single cell and DNA particle in those animals. It's Biophotons are strung down the DNA helix of every single one of your cells, every single cell in your food, whether it's a plant or animal, until it gets cooked. Um, in addition to those particles which seem to provide some sort of benefit to us, which would make sense because based on quantum physics, electric universe theory, um, and just almost an Occam's razor because what good things on this planet don't come from the light, the electricity, the energy of the sun? Whether you're a plant or animal, you're still photosynthetic. You make you make nutrients in your body autotrophically the same way that a plant does. The only difference is hemoglobin versus chlorophyll, and then your structure and form. But you're still a solar panel, just like a leaf is a solar panel. It matters. So there's light coming out of each DNA particle, which gets fried, toasted, broiled, baked, grilled away when you cook it. Um, in addition to those light particles, you also have food molecules that are in beautiful shapes, like a oriental ribbon dancer or something to that effect. Intricate, delicate, and nuanced in form with an electric charge, ionically bonded. And when you cook it, that those food particles get unfolded and they turn into a limp, soggy noodle, basically. It's it's night and day. That's why your steak comes off the animal beautiful reds and purples, and then you cook it and it's that dull gray, or if you really cook it, then it starts to turn into charcoal, right? You get those black grill lines on there and those crusted edges on your smoked salmon or your grilled salmon, your grilled whatever it is, pork chops. So you took this beautiful, pigmented, brightly colored, electrically charged food that used to be alive and probably felt pain and comfort, and you took all the energy that it took for them to collect food and exist as a creature, and most of it gets zapped away into the smoke and the steam coming off of these animals. You're literally cooking away the potential energy and the potential nourishment in the food. So for all of you people out there who pride yourselves on being respectful to the animal because you eat nose to tail or you eat from the ground, just remember that most of the efficiency, most of the gift that that food had to give you was in the rawness before you cooked it. If we're being very, very strict in our definitions of efficiency and respect to an animal and using everything that is there when the animal is killed, then cooking your food is the single biggest abomination you can do to it this side of processing and tainting it with chemicals. Your high fructose corn syrups, your preservatives like propylene glycol and BHT, BHQ, citric acid, things like that. That stuff's absolutely unreasonable. We don't even need to go into that, but I will go into that in another video. Right now we're talking just about cooking and how incredibly deleterious it is to the benefit, the nutriment of those foods. It's people who are a little hip and understand that there is something to rawness, like the Weston A. Price Foundation, headed by Sally Fallon, or at least used to be headed by Sally Fallon, under her guidance would say, make sure you get at least 50% of your diet raw. And I understand what she's trying to do. She doesn't want to be extremist. She doesn't think it's super necessary because saturated fats are very stable, even when they're heated. But they're not stable in terms of what we're talking about here. And that is, in terms of actual efficiency from your food, the gift that was in there, you are losing approximately 90%, just a guess, but I don't have a way to empirically measure this right now. 80 to 90% of what your food actually had to give in terms of its most important benefit. Does that make sense? Yes, you're getting proteins, carbohydrates, fats, but they're all warped. They're all distorted. What if somebody gives you a pair of sunglasses or a pair of prescription reading glasses, lenses, that are 80 to 90% distorted? How do you see the world? You only see it 10% in fidelity to what your perceptions are. Otherwise, it's skewed. It's going to be blurry and wonky. That's what's going on with your food. And that analogy is a very good analogy. It's almost a symbolic allegory, because when you take in those perverted, in the strict sense of the word, they've been mutated, they've been warped. Not mutated in the sense of the way synthetics mutate, but mutated in a sense that your body's not going to recognize them as a food, strictly speaking. They will recognize them as a toxin, which must be used to derive life sustenance because it has no other option. If you only feed your body cooked foods, or you mostly feed your body cooked foods, it's going to do what your hyper-intelligent meat suit does, which is keep you alive and kicking. Your body is always, 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 always doing its best under the conditions you, or if you're a slave or a prisoner or a hospital ward, or a, if you're in an asylum or something like that, where you can't control your surroundings, it's always going to be doing its best within the internal and external environment you give it, which means the air you breathe, the thoughts you think, the beliefs and emotions you have, the things you come into contact with in your skin, foods you eat, the waters, the beverage liquids you drink, all of those are going to influence such things. And so cooking takes away 80 to 90% of that. That's what I'm asserting, and I believe it to be self-evident with right perspective. When you eat this garbage, these foods, they literally taint the way that you interact with the world. A lot of people will have had interactions with extremely aggressive cops, and one thing I've noticed over my years is that you will see due to the nature of their work, you will see a large proportion of police going to drive-thrus, places like Taco Bell and McDonald's and Wendy's. And these foods are known to make people aggressive. Whether you're a child or an adult, they evoke an aggressive mechanism inside. Anyways, I have to cut off this video, but in raw foods you have purity, in cooked foods you do not.